let's get a bit evil.
It's not even a real laugh.
Marvel Rivals has such a fun cast of heroes, big and small, popular and niche, blonde and blonde. However, my biggest problem with the cast that I think is left to be desired is, where's all the bad guys? Seriously, there's like almost no true bad guys in the game that aren't reformed or just anti-heroes. And honestly, I can't blame the devs much, since 90% of the most notable villains all come from SpiderMan or the X-Men's Rogues Gallery. Seriously, try to name one villain that hasn't been in any Marvel movie and has more than a single-digit amount of fans. Yeah, that's what I thought. Regardless, there's still a handful of villains I think would be super cool to see in the game. I mean, they already have most of all the main heroes for the verse in the game, so they could just perfectly add in the villains so we can get new interactions and crazy team-ups with them. Plus, every bad guy needs a good layer or base of operations so that we can have a bunch of new stages from that too. Shoot, even before getting into the characters, if they had enough villains, we could get a hero versus villains game mode all in and of itself. It would be so cool to play as team-ups where you could kind of roleplay some real villain teams against real hero teams from the comics. Regardless, getting off track, I mostly just want to focus in this video on some villains that I think would be really fun to add to the game. And ones that would theoretically have the most potential, I guess. I had a weird system for this, I'll try to get into that. Starting off, I'm trying to only limit myself to one Spider-Man villain and one X-Men villain, since if I don't, this list could easily just be 10 times longer while consisting of only Spidey and mutant foes. Mutant foes, I don't like that. It sounds like a racial term. My second stipulation is that I don't want to add in any characters that could be used as main antagonists of an event or battle pass or something, since there's so many ways the narrative could affect their moveset, and I don't want to just casually throw them out when there's so much more potential for them as major antagonists, you know. Now, with my silly little self-imposed restrictions out of the way, we can go ahead and just get started with the least controversial and most brand-friendly character in all of Marvel history.
Oh, well, Heil Hitler, bitch!
Alright, now let's just try and tiptoe around the Austrian painter party goer here and get into how this super friendly guy could play in the game. Firstly, I'm going to admit that this moveset is going to be really weird if you aren't familiar with some of the Red Skull stories from the comics. Mostly just one, but you know what I mean. The Red Skull I envisioned for this game is a mix between the current Rivals lore of Hydra doing research on Eldritch Lovecraftian deities, and the clone of Red Skull that acts after the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline and during the Axis storyline, where he has psychic abilities that he got from stealing a part of Professor X's brain. Yeah, comics are kind of kooky. All that to say, this Skull is a strategist who uses psychic abilities from, say it with me, Lovecraftian deity to heal and buff his teammates. His usefulness will mostly come from his ability to strengthen his allies while simultaneously being able to weaken his enemies. For basics, his main fire is a Luger pistol, because Austrian painter party, and the healing ability for Skull is a Wave of Hate that heals a good amount and gives a decent damage buff to allies in range for a short time. This could be in a wave motion that affects all allies in front of him within a more limited range as to not make it too overpowered. To debuff your enemies, you could use the Red Skull's thematic Dust of Death in the form of a landmine. Imagine the landmines working just like Junkrat's concussion mines, where you throw them out and can detonate them at a later point, or they can go off whenever they're shot at. This way you can use it as a defensive tool when you're under fire and on the back foot during a close range encounter by tossing it at your opponent and having them detonate it when they shoot at it. Either way it goes off, it releases the signature Dust of Death, which gives a damage debuff on all enemies in range for a good time. You could also give a fun flavor detail of having the affected get their models slightly changed to have a shrunken red head, the same way the Dust of Death works in the comics. And for his last normal ability, I want to add a direct connection to the being that Bucky gets his arm from. So Kraken's Protection is a defensive ability that causes all damage you would take for a short time to be instead converted into temporary HP. This is just a good way to give yourself some more survivability as a healer. And finally, Red Skull's ultimate, at least the name, comes directly from the previously referenced storyline of the comics, Red Onslaught, which would be a massive variation of Wave of Hate that inflicts all enemies with a fear status effect while also healing all allies and giving or extending them a damage buff. Fear is a status effect that causes the affected to be unable to use any of their special abilities. Now, with all these moves together, I will admit that these moves could make for a strategist that's harder to work around since he only has one healing ability, but I think these all come together to work really well. The healing wave would be quite large for a standard healing AoE, and his unique brand of support would come more so from debuffing and protecting himself, which would allow him to take shots for his enemies. So this is a way that he could be a support role without directly just blind healing people. Now, team-ups. I'm going to start off by saying it was hard as hell to find good team-ups for these guys, since they're villains who would really want to team up with the Red Skull. Side note, while I was doing my research, apparently even most villains don't want to team up with Red Skull out of immorality. If you have the Kingpin talking about his quote-unquote patriotic duty to screw you over, you must really be extra depraved. Either way, I tried my best with these, so let me know what you think of these and if you change up the pairings and how you would like to do them. The first team up for Red Skull was kind of easy since he had to have one with the Winter Soldier, since they do share the same source of power. For these two, it could just be as simple as Bucky gaining the same amount of temporary HP as the Red Skull would gain when using Kraken's protection if he uses it in close enough proximity to him. And the other team up could be with Hela. Hear me out. This could just give Hela an additional damage buff when she's hit by an ally Red Skull's Dust of Death. I figured this would just be a super fun way of pairing them since Red Skull is a literal mass murderer, and I figured the Goddess of Death would be a pretty big fan of that whole vibe, you know? Now let's go ahead and skip out on this section before the YouTube content bots can figure out the political leaning of our current subject.
I'm going to kill you and then kill you again.
DPS, DPS, DPS. Obviously, Bullseye is going to be the most DPS sniper character of them all. Now, the hard part, though, was making his abilities fit for sniper without just making him a copy of Hawkeye or Black Widow, who those two are kind of the archetypical first-person sniper characters. For this, I figured it would be best to make him a more agile character akin to SpiderMan and Star-Lord. For starters, his main fire is going to be his throwing cards, which will shoot one at a time, while his alt fire will shoot a spread, kind of like how Genji shurikens work in Overslop. Actually, now that I think about it, this moveset is kind of similar to the same sneaky sniper role Genji fills. I guess the Overslop nostalgia is kicking in too hard. The first ability for Bullseye is an augmented form of his main fire, where he fires an explosive card that functions the same way but explodes on contact with the enemy or environment. This is mostly a great multi-tool for dealing a lot of splash damage, while also pushing away enemies, and can be used for misdirection. The next two abilities are more useful for your movement. Firstly, a cling wire, which is legally distinct from a grappling hook or any web swinging. The wire will stick to a part of the environment and instantly pull you to that point. A main aspect of this wire is that it will stick you to the environment until you release it. This is a great way of creating your own sniper spot, but you can't move from the chosen location without dropping to the ground. So you'll have to balance a comfortable spot, and then when people recognize you, you'll obviously have to move on from there. But I figure this is a good way of keeping his movement a big aspect of a sniper's gameplay style. His second movement ability is a backflip kick that's pretty much just a slight alteration from Star-Lord's Stellar Shift. This kickflip always results in a backwards flip and doesn't automatically reload for you like Star-Lord's does, but it can knock back enemies while dealing decent damage to them. I can already imagine how fun the combos would be with picking off strategists by using your kickflip to knock them back and then finishing them off with an explosive card. Now for a big defining part of Bullseye's playstyle I had in mind would be his passive critical hits.
Leave me alone!
This just gives all his attacks a small chance of dealing critical damage to his opponent. All your body hits will have a 5% chance of being a crit, and your headshots will have a 10% chance of being a crit. I feel like this is a really fun way of making Bullseye more unique from the other snipers, with some added chaos, while also playing his character's natural skills and personality. Finally, his ultimate is another pull from It's So Overwatch, where it could literally just be McCree's Deadeye, since honestly, I couldn't think of anything more appropriate for him. To make it a bit more of a unique distinction for this version, the ability could make all your hits from the ultimate have 100% crit rate. Now, the team-ups were pretty fun here because I based one of them more off gameplay connections and the other off of a pull from the comics. First is a team-up with Bullseye and Moon Knight, where Bullseye can take over Moon Knight's onks and use them to ricochet his cards to the nearest enemy, just like how Moon Knight himself would. I came up with this one just because the two characters would play pretty similarly, but I don't think Moon Knight would actually like working with Bullseye very much, so it'd be pretty ironic to give them an interaction like this. The other team-up is with Bullseye and Iron Man, where Iron Man gains the ability to temporarily give all allies Bullseye's critical passive ability, while also increasing Bullseye's own crit rate for the duration. And this probably needs to be balanced out in some way. I think it'd be best if they didn't get the headshot bonus and they just got a strict 5% critical hit chance on all strikes. This is mainly based on when Iron Man hired Bullseye during the first Civil War event in the comics, and I figured this would be a fun, game-changing ability. It'd be such a gaming moment if you could pop this move while your team storms the point or has to defend against a massive push and get super lucky with multiple critical strikes. This could end up being a bit busted, but it's le funny. I let it pass. Overall, I felt more obligated to add Bullseye in after adding in Daredevil in the last vid. Plug if you haven't seen it yet. And I think this could be a really fun way of playing a mobile assassin, even if this kit isn't the most unique, honestly. Next, we can hop into our SpiderMan villain of the vid, and yeah, you probably already know which one I picked.
Fuck you, Spider-Man!
SpiderMan has a giant group of quality villains I could have used for this vid. Doc Ock, Electro, Rhino, Kraven, Sandman, Vulture, Mysterio,
Shocker!
Scorpion, the Lizard, Morbin Time, and so many more would be perfect for this game with really distinct play styles, but you know I had to go with the most iconic villain for our wall crawler, Willem Dafoe. This one was a bit of a challenge to come up with since the last thing this game needs is another flying DPS character. I swear at this rate, I'm going to have to deal with an entire team just airstriking my ass back to Bronze 3. So for Gabi here, I made him a DPS character who can fly rather than a flying DPS character. I swear it's different. Before getting into the flying, his main fire is a lob of his pumpkin bomb. These would be pretty slow and fly in an arch, but they deal a lot of splash damage to kind of make up for that. Next, I didn't want to make this an alt fire since the ability is strong enough to justify a cooldown, but I still wanted to give Goblin a cluster bomb. This would work the same as your main fire, but would result in many smaller explosions around the main bomb. This is intended to be a reliable form of crowd control while flying or grounded. Now for the flying ability proper, Glider Call will allow you to, well, call your glider. Surprise, surprise. While on your glider, it will slowly drain a fuel gauge. While you have fuel, you can fly around just like any other flying character. However, when your glider runs out of fuel, the glider will crash into the ground, causing a massive explosion that damages you and all the enemies in its radius. Plus, if your glider crashes, you'll have to wait for your glider to recharge, which would be fairly substantial and would lock you out of using some of your other abilities that require the glider. I like this a lot as a way of gaining a great advantage over most characters while having to risk your own health if you can't manage your resources and land in time. Plus, purposefully crashing your glider directly into the enemy sounds like a super fun self-sacrifice move to actually pull off. Next, you have a glider impale, which would work differently in your two states.
Oh.
Firstly, while grounded, you can simply call your glider to dash forward and impale all enemies in its path and drag them with it for its effective range. In your flying form, you dash forward on the glider with the same dragging effects as normal, but now you also get to clear that distance yourself. This last normal ability can only be done while in your gliding state. For your carpet bomb move, you dash forward similar to your impale, while dropping a plethora of pumpkin bombs under you. This is mostly just a fantastic move for taking out squishier characters, like SpiderMan. Lastly, Norman's ultimate was kind of difficult to figure out since there's a lot of different goblin alternates and tech they've used to take inspiration from, but ultimately, for this ultimate, I went with Ultimate Goblin. With this, you become huge and gain a lot of HP for the duration, and it replaces your main fire with dual grenade launchers that launches your pumpkin bombs at a much faster rate and in a straight line. Personally, I didn't really care for the Ultimate Universe's Green Goblin, but I figured it could work here as a temporary transformation, and a pretty powerful one at that. And the team-ups for Green Goblin were probably the hardest to come up with because he doesn't team up with really any of the cast very much to my knowledge. So for these two, I just kind of made it up to a degree. The first would be pretty simple of just adding Goblin to the Symbiote Bond ability, if they still had it. This is mostly just included since Norman is a former symbiote user, and I figured it's just pretty simple and easy to throw him on there. The other team-up comes more from Norman's Oscorp connections with Emma Frost. This would give Emma Frost a morale boost that increases the movement speed and reload speed of all allies in range. This is just a fun flavor for him of Emma and Norman using their wealth to boost their team for a short time. Overall, I'm pretty satisfied with how our little Gabby came out, since he's a new character type. I don't think Rivals has yet a Grenader character. Now for our X-Men villain, it was even harder than picking a Spider-Man villain, since there are a lot of villains that could fill many roles and have a lot of connections to the cast. No matter who I chose, I was sure somebody was going to be disappointed by it, so fuck it, I'll piss everybody off right now. Alright. Before getting into the character details, I want to just explain a bit about why I'm choosing a Sentinel as the X-Men villain rep. Firstly, I didn't want to pick a major X-Men villain that could be used in some storyline for the games, like how Ultron is being used right now. Secondly, I was never completely sure which role would fit for the characters I was thinking about. Mr. Sinister could range from Vanguard to Duelist to support. Apocalypse could be a tank, but he also carries a crazy set of abilities. I wasn't really sure how to round it down for a coherent kit. Omega Red could flip between tank and DPS, but I'm not aware enough of the character to make a unique moveset off of it. Mystique would make an awesome spy-like character, but I really want that role to go to my boy Morph, so I'm conflicted on that one. Juggernaut would be a cool tank, but a bit too simple. And lastly, Mojo. I need a Mojoverse stage yesterday! Also, add Spiral to the game, please and thank you. Anyway, I figured a Sentinel unit would be a perfect middle ground of popularity, kit balance, identity, and he would fill the role of a tank's tank. My biggest problem with the Rivals tank so far is that there are too many shitty dive tanks that aren't helpful most of the time because the people who pick them just want to play a DPS character. The closest we have are just Groot, Doctor Strange, Thing, and Magneto. I envision Sentinel as a fully defense-oriented character with a chunky old barrier and stun options, and yeah, just realizing that I miss Reinhardt. Also, just to make the Sentinel in this game a bit different than normal, for most interpretations, these Sentinels are the Stark Sentinels from the Midtown stage that have been captured and reprogrammed by AIM. I'm mostly making this change as an in for AIM to make a bigger appearance in the game so far, because I think the only reference to them is that one Captain America skin. I really like AIM's aesthetics and them as like a villain group, so I would love to see them take some kind of bigger role in the game, or small even would be fine by me. Also, MODOK could probably be another villain, but it's another one that was couldn't figure out what to do with him. Character ranting all aside, Sentinel's main fire could just be a simple plasma bolt. Perfectly average and rounded in all its stats, decent damage, decent fire rate, decent range, you get it. For some fun flavor, it would be cool if he had an ult fire that was a marking punch. Marked players could be seen through walls for a short time, so you could always know where they are on top of being a decent melee strike. This is mostly just included to call back to the Sentinel's role as a hunter of mutants. Now for the big tank boy stuff. We gotta have a big bulky shield for our bot. The biomechanical barrier is a large shield that blocks projectiles and deals continuous damage to all enemies that touch the shield. However, it can be destroyed like Captain America's shield, but the biomechanical barrier would have a much higher HP pool. This would be a fantastic deterrent for close-range characters like Iron Fist and Spider-Man, since they'd immediately start dropping in HP from just being close to the shield. The Sentinel can also stun enemies with its capture shot. This is a more powerful bolt that stuns all enemies it hits and pushes them back some. A powerful way to control the enemies and protect the squishies that wander past your shield. And his last normal ability, I would just like to give the Sentinel rockets they can use to slow fall as a reference to the comics where it can just straight up fly. The Sentinel's ultimate could see it combining with 2 other Sentinels to become a Tri-Sentinel and have all of its abilities quite literally tripled. The plasma bolts would now shoot 3 at once, your biomechanical barrier would become indestructible for the duration of your ultimate, and your capture shot would no longer have a cooldown. This could end up being a bit overkill, but it's a Sentinel. That's kind of their job. Now, teaming up with the heroes in this game was pretty fun to pick out. Obviously, we have to give an ironic team up with Magneto, where his metal bulwark also heals the Sentinel, because it's literally metal. Honestly, they should just make this a group team up with all the other robotic characters too, like Ultron. The other team up could be with another living weapon of war, the Punisher. This team up could give the Punisher's culling turret a smaller biomechanical barrier itself and a single charge capture shot the turret can use once per deployment. I love the theming these teams give to the characters involved. While both characters would realistically hate Sentinels, I think, it would be fun to see the interactions where Magneto has to begrudgingly aid a being sworn to destroy his people, and Frank would probably appreciate the weapons the machine has, but more so in a
I need his prosthetic leg
kind of way. Now, for a bit of a tangent before hopping into our last character, I want to give a little honorable mention. Taskmaster would be such a fun character to have in the game. He's a fan favorite from his design and ability set, which would be so cool to play firsthand in the game. I mainly didn't want to include him since he would probably fit best with a DPS character, and I already had 2 of them that I wanted to add in. Another reason is that for the life of me, I had no idea how to make him play. I was super torn between 2 ways of thinking about this kit. 1, he could have a moveset based on the characters he's shown to mimic most frequently, have a Cap shield bash, Spidey swing, Hawkeye's bow skill, sword attacks like magic, so on and so forth. Or 2, you could make him a full-blown copy character that could copy enemy movesets on the fly. And even this could break down further, so should he copy one move at a time or their entire kit at once? If you couldn't tell, I was majorly conflicted on how to make him play, so I unfortunately decided to just kind of leave him out for now. But if you have a breakdown of his moveset that you like, feel free to link it down below and I'll make it the pinned comment or share it with me on Twitter and I'll promote it there. Either way, I'd love to see what your vision for the character is. Now getting back into our last character, it's one I really picked kind of just for me. I really liked him since I first saw him in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and he's such a goofy concept, and I love him in the childish way possible. I'm not even going to pretend to be like, oh, he's the lore. Like, he's just cool, alright? I want him in the game because he's freaking epic. Okay, Super Skrull. How many of you are actually aware of this guy? Specifically Clerk, the Super Skrull with the powers of the Fantastic Four. Yeah, that's about what I thought. Super Skrull is so cool, because like I said, he has all the powers of the Fantastic Four in one form, on top of his Skrull military training. Like I said, I first saw him in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and I've loved him mostly just based on the concept ever since. Plus, since all 4 of the Fantastic guys are already in the game, we can make him a sort of composite character that has aspects from all 4 of them in his moves. This combination could make him a perfectly rounded tank that could fit many different roles. Starting off with his main fire could be fire orbs, Invisible Woman's orb projection with added fire effects for more damage. This could work exactly the same as orb projection, but without the healing and increased damage from the fire. His ult fire could be a stretch haymaker, which would travel farther the longer you charge it up, like a mix between Mr. Fantastic's punches and the Thing's haymaker, if you couldn't tell by the name. Now we have the main abilities, firstly with Ultimate Defense, where Clerk gains a lot of temporary HP through psionic armor on top of his rocky form, while he also can reflect projectiles with his rubbery body like Captain America's shield. To get enemies off you and your team, you can explode psionic and plasma energy outwards, dealing massive damage and knockback. Kind of like a mix between Sue Storm's psionic push and Johnny Storm's landing explosion. I forget what it's called off the top of my head. For supporting your allies more directly and helping you get around, you can have an elongated grab, which works differently on enemies and allies. When you grab an ally, you can dash to them and gain some temporary HP, while if you grab an enemy, you dash towards them and burn them so the affected takes chip damage for a short amount of time afterwards. And for the last ultimate, the Super Scroll unleashes the Super Combination, where he perfectly combines his borrowed powers. He starts off by gaining a ton of temporary HP and replaces his main fire with stretching punches that deal massive damage and burn all enemies they hit. Now on to the last team-ups. One set was kind of easy to pick, if not a bit cheap maybe, while the other was kind of weird, but I feel like it fits thematically with the character. First is a team-up with Super Scroll and any of the Fantastic Four, where the Scroll's Stretch Haymaker and Psionic Burst will deal increased damage by feeding off the Four's own cosmic radiation. The other team-up is with both Star-Lord and Black Panther. Hear me out a bit on this one. This team-up is based on Clerk as a representative of the Skrull Empire as a whole. With these connections, it would make sense that he would bring the two Space Kings a diplomatic gift of a cosmic flash grenade that the two can gain access to. The stun grenade simply stuns enemies hit by them for a short time, exactly like how you'd think they'd work. I know I kind of sped through these abilities a bit more, but I feel like the moves are pretty self-explanatory, and if you know how the Fantastic Four already play, you kind of get the idea of how this guy combines their powers together. Either way, this combination of moves, I think, works extremely well for a really well-rounded tank that can suit many different types of enemy engagements. Alright, and that's all the villains I have for now. I think this is a good pick of characters that would reasonably get in while still not being a lot of people's first choice. Like, I don't see a lot of people talking about Super Skrull or Bullseye or Red Skull getting into the game, or even Sentinel, really, but I feel like these are some good, solid choices for ones that would surprise people to some degree, but could also be pretty fun in gameplay. I also think they pair up pretty well with a lot of the characters already in the cast, and again, it'd be one that'd be really fun to watch the different interactions with in the pre-fight dialogue, or even just, since they are villains, hearing their quotes after they kill characters would be really fun. Like, imagine Super Skrull, or Red Skull, or Sentinel, or Green Goblin, or literally any of the characters I introduced here, what they would have to say after killing their like respective characters. It would just be so fun, I think. Getting to see their personality shine a bit more in that. But if you liked them or any of the art you saw here, if you want to see anything else I'm working on, you can check me out on Twitter and stuff, I guess. I'm on there, or Newgrounds too, if you prefer that platform. I'm on Newgrounds as well. I'll try to have I think I should have all the art from this video and the last Marvel Rivals video I did about all the heroes I would like to add. If you want to check that out, I'll leave a link to all that in the description or whatever. And if you liked what you saw here and you want to see more stuff like it, feel free to do all the little YouTube stuff, the like, comment, subscribing, bell. That's a new one. I didn't grow up with the bell, so that's a new one I have to work in the vocabulary. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have any villains or yourself you'd like to add to the game, I'd like to hear what you would do with them in the comments below. Or if you have any art yourself you'd like to share, again, on Twitter or anything, if you want to share something with me, I'll be happy to repost it or retweet, whatever, how that works. But I think that's all I've got for today. So I hope you liked the video and all that. And I guess I'll be seeing you in the next one.